Welcome to Simplified UPSC by PPP, where we listen, learn, and grow together. Detailed lecture notes in English and Hindi, plus practice questions for prelims and mains, only on our Telegram channel. Link in description. Like and subscribe for more.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive, the channel where we really try to transform these complex, high-stakes technical documents and research
into something immediate, right? Something actionable.
Exactly. Comprehensive knowledge, custom-built just for you, the learner.
Our mission today is, it's a really exhaustive technical immersion. We are pulling back the water on tsunamis.
We're not just covering the basic definitions, are we?
No, not at all. We are drilling down into the precise science, the specific engineering metrics, the global and local warning systems, and all the nuanced mitigation strategies. It's about giving you a complete UPSC-level understanding of this devastating phenomenon.
So that means we've got a stack of source material that's, well, it's heavy on geological physics, oceanographic technology, and some really detailed disaster management policy.
We'll be covering the mechanics that give these waves their incredible speed, the technologies that try to track them across vast oceans like the DART system.
And we'll also critically analyze the effectiveness of, say, physical defenses versus smart land management, which is so important, particularly in regions as vulnerable as the Indian coastline.
But before we plunge into the mechanics of these massive waves, there's a quick but essential reminder we need to make.
Yes. The depth and the quality of these deep dives, they really do rely entirely on community support. So we want to invite you to join the channel as a YouTube member.
Your membership is really the fuel that keeps this highly technical, high-quality UPSC content accessible and free for everyone. If you find value in these detailed breakdowns, please do consider supporting the mission.
And a huge, sincere shout out to our existing members. Thank you for being the cornerstone of this community.
You really are the reason we can dedicate the time necessary to synthesize all this complexity into, hopefully, a lot of clarity.
Okay, so today's analysis is structured pretty meticulously. We're going to start with the definitive science and characteristics of the wave itself.
Then we'll transition to the violent geological and physical origins. After that, we'll dissect the advanced warning systems used globally and specifically within India.
And finally, we'll conclude with a critical look at the societal impacts and the policy limitations of some of these engineering solutions.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's begin with a foundational definition, the physics of how a tsunami is born and how it moves.
I think we have to start with the language, with the word itself, because even the name gives us a huge clue about its impact.
Indeed. The term tsunami is derived from Japanese words, su, which means harbor, and nami, which means waves.
So harbor wave.
Literally harbor wave, which is fascinating because out in the open ocean, the wave is often barely noticeable. It's almost invisible.
Right.
It only truly reveals its destructive potential when it approaches the shallow water near the harbor or the shoreline.
And, this leads directly to the most common conceptual error. It's something we absolutely have to correct right at the top.
You're talking about tidal waves.
Exactly. They are popularly called tidal waves, but this is a complete misnomer. It's a term we really need to purge from our technical vocabulary.
Absolutely. The critical distinction here is that these waves have, and this is key, nothing to do with the tides.
Right. Tides are about gravity.
Yes. Tides are a long-term predictable phenomenon governed by the gravitational pull of the moon and the sun. A tsunami, on the other hand, is governed by the sudden, violent physics of the rapid displacement of water.
From a lake, or more commonly, the seafloor.
Exactly.
So if it's not the moon's gravity and it's not the wind, which are the two forces that drive most of the water movement we see, what does this rapid displacement actually look like at a physical level?
Well, think of the entire water column. I mean, from the seabed all the way to the surface being lifted or dropped almost instantaneously.
The whole call.
A whole thing. This is fundamentally different from a wind-driven wave, which really only moves the surface layer of the water. So when a tectonic plate on the seafloor snaps upward, it pushes that entire massive column of water vertically. This displaced water swells up, forming what starts as a very subtle but very long wave pulse deep beneath the surface.
And that's the pulse that ultimately surges over land with such immense destructive power when it finally reaches the coast.
Precisely.
And the physical characteristics of this wave pulse in the deep ocean. They're completely unlike anything we typically imagine when we think of a wave at the beach.
Let's talk about the tsunami wave train.
That's the key technical term right there. It travels as a tsunami wave train, a series of waves, not just one single isolated disturbance. And what dictates its behavior is its incredible wavelength.
How long are we talking?
It can span hundreds of kilometers.
Wow. Yeah.
Because of that massive wavelength, its interaction with the deep ocean floor is minimal, which allows for, well, spectacular speed.
And this is where the technical metrics become truly staggering.
They really do. In deep water, these waves move incredibly fast. We're talking up to 800 km/h. So to put that speed into perspective for you, the learner, a common analogy that's used, and it's one you should definitely remember, is that they travel at jet airplane speed.
A commercial jet. It's just mind-boggling.
And it's the depth of the ocean that allows for that speed, right?
That's it, exactly. If you have minimal friction over a water column that might be 4,000 or 5,000 meters deep, the wave's energy is propagated horizontally with almost no loss.
Which is why a seismic event off the coast of, say, Alaska can genuinely threaten Hawaii hours and hours later.
Precisely. And that concept of the tsunami wave train is just vital for coastal safety and for warning strategies.
Because it's not just one wave.
It's not. And because the wavelength is so immense, the interval, the time between the successive waves hitting the shore is huge. The periods can range dramatically, from 5 minutes to 90 minutes apart.
90 minutes, an hour and a half. That's terrifying. It means that if the first wave, maybe a smaller one, hits the shore, people might mistakenly believe the danger has passed.
Yes. And then the subsequent wave, which might be the biggest one in the whole train, arrives an hour and a half later. The damage isn't instantaneous. It's a protracted siege that can last for many hours.
It must create a crucial public safety dilemma. How do you convince people who are standing on the beach after the first wave recedes that the danger is still very, very present?
And that the entire tsunami wave train must pass before they can even think about returning safely. This physical characteristic, it directly influences every single evacuation protocol.
Okay, so the speed is terrifying, but it's that massive initial energy release that we need to investigate now. Let's move to the origins of this rapid displacement. What is the most common geological trigger?
Unquestionably, the primary and the most common cause is seismic activity.
An earthquake.
Specifically, it's generated by fault movements on the seafloor that are accompanied by a powerful earthquake.
But not all earthquakes cause tsunamis, right? For a technical audience like ours, we need to distinguish the tsunamigenic mechanism.
That's an excellent point. This is where the nuance is so critical. We're primarily talking about thrust faults.
Which occur at subduction zones.
Exactly. Where one tectonic plate is slipping under another, what happens is the overriding plate locks, builds up stress, and then suddenly snaps upward. That generates that massive vertical displacement we talked about.
So that's the classic mechanism.
It is. In contrast, you have strike-slip faults, where the plates just slide horizontally past each other. They generate far less vertical movement and are generally considered a much lower risk for major tsunamis.
So understanding the type of fault movement is really the first step in assessing tsunami risk immediately after an earthquake.
Right. And because these seismic events release such huge amounts of energy, they have the capacity to cross entire oceans. The scale of the displacement really determines the scale of the crisis.
Okay, moving beyond plate tectonics, what's the second major cause?
Landslides. These can occur either entirely under the water, we call them submarine landslides, or they can originate above the sea and then plunge violently into the water.
Creating a highly concentrated splash event.
A very, very concentrated event.
And to understand the sheer concentrated power of these landslide-induced tsunamis, we really have to look at one of the most extreme events ever recorded. I'm thinking of Lituya Bay, Alaska in 1958.
Yes. That was the result of a massive rock slide plunging into a very narrow fjord.
The energy transfer must have been just unimaginable.
It was. This rock slide produced the largest tsunami ever recorded by a landslide event. It generated a high watermark. It reached an unbelievable 50 to 150 meter height above the shoreline in certain spots.
150 meters, that's a skyscraper of water. It's almost impossible to picture.
It is. So while a seismic tsunami like the one in 2004 can travel for thousands of miles, a landslide tsunami shows that a localized energy release can create the highest single waves.
All because of that instantaneous concentrated displacement. The threat is different, but the immediate destruction is just unparalleled.
The third major cause involves volcanic activity, which is, equally spectacular and just as devastating.
How does a volcano manage to displace an entire ocean?
Well, volcanic activity can cause tsunamis when the flank of the volcano suddenly uplifted or depressed, and this is the most violent scenario, it just explodes.
The definitive historical example here has to be the 1883 eruption of Krakatoa in Indonesia.
That explosion was one of the most powerful natural events in recorded human history.
The sound was heard thousands of miles away.
It was. The violent explosion of that volcano produced tsunami waves, measuring a massive 40 meters in height as they crashed into the nearby islands.
40 meters.
40 meters. This event completely crushed Java and Sumatra, and it resulted in over 36,000 people losing their lives. This historical data point just perfectly illustrates the catastrophic confluence of atmospheric shock waves and massive oceanic displacement.
Before we move on to detection, a final note on global risk. The source material makes it clear that while tsunamis have occurred in all oceans, even the Mediterranean Sea,
The vast majority of them have occurred in the Pacific Ocean.
that's directly because of the geology, right?
Yeah. It's directly due to what we just discussed. The geological reality of the Pacific Rim being encircled by the Ring of Fire, which is essentially a continuous line of major active subduction zones, and those thrust faults we talked about.
Okay, now we have to address the most urgent challenge. Giving people enough time to escape that 800-kilometer wall of water.
Right. The core issue, as we noted, is that since scientists can't exactly predict the timing of the earthquakes that cause them, the focus has to shift entirely to immediate detection and warning.
This challenge gave rise to the need for a formal, structured international response.
It did. Following the devastating 1946 Hilo tsunami, the global community came together to establish the Pacific Tsunami Warning System, or PTWS. This really remains the cornerstone of global coordination.
And the nerve center for this entire system, where is it based?
The operational center is the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, the PTWC. It's strategically located near Honolulu in Hawaii.
And what's its primary role?
The PTWC is responsible for synthesizing real-time seismic data and, crucially, deep ocean conformation data to assess the threat level.
So when they confirm a potential threat, what specific alert gets disseminated?
They issue a tiered system of alerts, but the major initial one is the Tsunami Watch alert.
Okay.
This communication is critical. It provides an immediate warning and includes predicted arrival times at selected coastal communities within the potential threat area. This is the crucial window for evacuation protocols to kick in.
But seismic data alone isn't enough, is it? Because a huge earthquake doesn't always guarantee a devastating tsunami.
That's the problem. You need to confirm that the wave is actually moving across the ocean.
And this is where the engineering marvel of the DART system comes into play.
Yes. DART stands for Deep Ocean Assessment and Reporting of Tsunami. It is, I would argue, the single most important component of modern early warning.
Why is that?
Because it confirms the height and the speed of the wave in the open ocean. It allows for accurate modeling rather than just relying on the location and magnitude of the initial earthquake.
So how does this actually work mechanically? A sensor has to detect a really subtle pressure change at an incredible depth, all while filtering out massive background noise.
It's truly ingenious. The core component is the bottom pressure recorder, or BPR. This BPR is anchored directly to the seafloor at extreme depths, sometimes up to 6,000 meters.
6,000 meters? That's almost 4 miles down. It must have to be incredibly rugged to withstand the immense hydrostatic pressure at that depth.
It does. 6,000 meters down, that pressure is about 600 times the atmospheric pressure we experience right now at sea level.
So what exactly is it measuring down there?
It measures the pressure of the entire water column above it with microsensitivity. So as a fast-moving, long-wavelength tsunami passes overhead, even if that wave is only a few centimeters tall in the deep water.
Which it often is.
Right. That tiny change in the mass of the water column causes a distinct, measurable pressure fluctuation. The algorithms in the BPR are smart enough to filter out the normal, slow pressure changes caused by things like atmospheric weather and tides.
And then how does it get that critical information from the ocean floor all the way up to a satellite thousands of kilometers above Earth?
The BPR transmits the data acoustically, so using sound, up through the water column to a surface buoy Y that's floating directly above it.
I see.
That buoy then relays the data via satellite, and that provides real-time, confirmed information about the wave train's motion, its size, and its speed back to centers like the PTWC.
So that's the data that turns a general seismic alert into a specific high-confidence tsunami watch.
That's the confirmation. Exactly.
Now let's pivot a bit and look at the specifics of Indian infrastructure and some of its challenges. What complementary systems does India utilize along its vulnerable coastal belt?
Well, India's system includes the foundational survey of India Tide Gauge Network. It's all along its coastline, and that provides critical confirmation data as the wave approaches or hits local points.
Right.
And during the response to the devastating 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, radar detection was also employed for close-range monitoring of the waves.
The 2004 event, though, it really exposed a massive technical deficit, didn't it? Specifically regarding space-based tracking at that time.
It did. And that's the crucial limitation we have to discuss. The limitations of satellite observations in providing immediate, actionable warning. The post-disaster analysis revealed that in 2004, the available satellite data took an unacceptable 5 hours to process.
5 hours. If the DART system can confirm a wave in minutes, why did the advanced satellite data lag by 5 hours? Is the technology just fundamentally different?
It's a combination of the technology and the infrastructure that was available at that time. Deep ocean detection, like DART, it's a focused point source measurement that's transmitted very quickly.
Okay.
Satellite observation, on the other hand, often uses complex systems like synthetic aperture radar, or SAR. These generate massive amounts of data that require significant computational power to process, stitch together, and interpret before you can extract a definitive wave signature.
So in 2004, by the time the satellite data had confirmed the height and the scale of the waves?
The disaster had already occurred in many coastal areas.
Exactly.
And this highlights that while space-based observation holds tremendous promise for the future, for truly global high-resolution warning, our immediate reliance remains on robust seismic networks and that in-situ confirmation provided by systems like DART.
So the goal for future systems is to drastically cut that processing time.
Absolutely. To potentially make space-based observation a direct, real-time warning input, not just a confirmation tool after the fact.
We understand the speed and the origins now. Let's turn to what the wave actually does when it hits. The source material notes that local tsunami events, so those generated less than 30 minutes from the source, cause the majority of damage.
Right, and that's mainly due to the minimal warning time and just the sheer force of the flooding effect, which can completely raze human settlements and infrastructure.
But the physical destruction is actually a dual-phase event, and that's something that's often misunderstood. It's not just the crest of the wave coming in.
The return flow is equally, if not more, destructive from a structural point of view.
We have to explain the danger of the withdrawal of tsunami, that massive pulling back of the water after the wave has crested.
This is the insidious element. The velocity of the returning water, pulling massive amounts of sand and debris with it, can generate enormous scour forces.
So it just erodes everything.
It literally sweeps out the entire foundations and supports of structures that might have even survived the initial deluge. It turns debris into high-velocity wrecking balls and drags anything that isn't structurally sound or bolted down back out to sea.
Moving to the less dramatic but still critical long-term concerns, public health concerns.
Okay.
The immediate loss of life, that primarily comes from drowning and debris trauma. But in terms of infectious disease, which often follows large floods, what's the specific risk profile for tsunamis?
Well, the sources note that large-scale secondary health epidemics are not typically generated immediately. That's a bit different from slow-onset river floods. But the infrastructure damage generates profound secondary public health threats. Specifically, the violent water movement ruptures underground facilities. That leads to immediate sewage disposal problems and the mixing of untreated waste with, well, everything else.
And the long-term contamination of vital resources is perhaps the greatest persistent health hazard, especially in agrarian coastal communities.
Precisely. A critical concern is the widespread and long-lasting saltwater contamination of open wells and other groundwater sources,
which ruins drinking water.
It severely compromises drinking water supplies and, crucially, irrigation sources for farming. This problem is then severely exacerbated by the mixture of debris and raw sewage introduced by the receding water. Recovery from this kind of contamination can take years.
And finally, let's touch on the cascading socioeconomic impacts, which translate directly into policy challenges for long-term recovery.
These are profound. We see large-scale crop loss from flooding agricultural land with saline water, which can render the soil infertile for a long period. That leads to major food security issues.
And for coastal populations who depend on the sea.
For them, there is the immediate loss of livelihood due to the destruction of their equipment. We're talking particularly about the loss of boats and nets. This widespread, localized catastrophe leads to general environmental degradation, disrupting ecosystems, and potentially forcing long-term migration away from the coast.
All of this has to inform our mitigation strategies.
It has to.
Let's focus now specifically on India. Given its extensive coastline and its proximity to highly active tectonic zones, the source material explicitly states that the whole of the Indian coastal belt is prone to tsunami.
And this is not a regional threat. It's a national preparedness imperative.
Right.
And while India hasn't faced the sheer frequency of events that the Pacific Rim has, the historical record confirms significant past incidents, especially associated with activity in the Bay of Bengal, the Andaman Sea, and the Makran subduction zone.
We should detail these specific data points for context.
We should. Starting over a century ago, we had an event in 1881 that affected Car Nicobar. That indicates historical seismic activity in the Andaman Sea region.
And that was followed by another one.
Yes, the 1941 event, which impacted the Andaman archipelago. These incidents illustrate a persistent, albeit lower frequency, tectonic risk in India's island territories.
Then there was a particularly high wave recorded in 1945, but it originated much further west. It was caused by the Karachi earthquake.
That's right. This event, which was linked to the Makran Trench, saw waves reaching a height of 12 meters at Kandla on the western coast of India.
12 meters, that is a significant height for a coastline that's traditionally considered less prone to that kind of large-scale seismic displacement.
It really underscores that vulnerability is complex and it's multifaceted. It's not just one area.
And, of course, the event that redefined coastal disaster management globally and domestically, the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami.
That event affected many nations, but in India, it devastated Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, and of course the Andaman and Nicobar Islands.
What were the metrics for India in that event?
The waves in India measured around 10 meters high in many areas. It killed more than 10,000 plus precious lives in the country. This catastrophic human and economic loss was the catalyst for India to dramatically enhance its DART integration and set up its own dedicated warning system.
And to truly illustrate the sheer destructive potential and to inform our discussion on mitigation, we have to put those 10-meter Indian waves into a global comparative scale.
Right.
Let's revisit the extreme example of the 1993 Hokkaido event in Japan.
The 1993 tsunami waves hit Hokkaido as high as 30 meters. That's 100 feet. This metric is just crucial because it sets the upper boundary for what modern engineering has to contend with.
100 feet of water surging inland. That's as high as a 10-story building. It's an astonishing height.
It is. This comparison is vital. It shows that while a 10-meter wave is devastating, the sheer theoretical upper limit of destructive potential is far, far greater.
Which demands a reevaluation of every single mitigation strategy we have.
Every single.
Okay, so when you're facing a potential 30-meter wave that's traveling at 800 kilometers an hour, relying solely on technology for evacuation just isn't sufficient.
No, you have to employ physical defenses and, I would argue more importantly, smart policy.
Let's look at the structural measures first.
Well, the most visible and certainly the most expensive structural solution is the implementation of tsunami walls. Japan, given its extreme exposure, has invested very heavily in these, building walls up to 4.5 meters or about 13.5 feet high in front of its densely populated coastal areas.
They also integrate some sophisticated water management structures, don't they?
They do. This includes the strategic use of floodgates and offshore structures like water breakers. The aim of these breakers isn't to stop the wave completely,
but to dissipate its energy.
Exactly. To dissipate its energy and redirect the flow, which can significantly reduce the wave's velocity before it hits the immediate shoreline.
However, we need a critical effectiveness analysis of these defenses. And that 1993 Hokkaido event provides the perfect and, frankly, sobering counterexample.
It really does. The 30-meter wave in Hokkaido demonstrated the fundamental limit of structural engineering against the largest events. Even a robust wall designed to withstand a certain level of energy is simply overwhelmed.
So what happened there?
The 30-meter waves completely wash right over the multi-million-dollar seawall that was surrounding the port town of Aone. Just went right over it.
This raises a critical technical distinction. Are we talking about the height of the wave out in the ocean or its height when it actually impacts the coast? Because this is the difference between wave height and something called run-up.
And that distinction is paramount for a high-level analysis. Wave height is what you measure in the water. Run-up is the maximum vertical height the water achieves on dry land.
I see.
The 30-meter metric in Hokkaido was a run-up height. It indicates that the kinetic energy of the incoming water was so immense that it simply converted its velocity into elevation as it hit the steep slope.
Rendering those 4.5-meter walls completely obsolete. So the source material is pretty explicit here. While structural barriers might provide some protection against smaller, more frequent tsunamis,
Their effectiveness against the largest events has been significantly questioned. It leads to the conclusion that no structural measure is guaranteed against the largest threats.
therefore, the focus has to shift heavily toward land management strategies, the non-structural, the policy-based solutions.
It's about minimizing exposure rather than attempting to stop an unstoppable force.
And the first step there is intelligent site planning. This is a policy decision that determines the location, the configuration, and the density of development.
The goal is to fundamentally reduce tsunami risk by strategically putting less vulnerable infrastructure in harm's way from the very outset.
And this leads directly to zoning designating coastal zones for specific uses.
For open space uses, this means encouraging the use of high-hazard areas for non-critical functions, things like agriculture or parks. The policy goal is explicitly avoiding high-occupancy uses. So, schools, hospitals, dense residential towers in the most vulnerable, lowest-lying areas.
In coastal India, this implies a rigorous application of coastal zone regulations and also the possible use of what we might call biological buffers.
Absolutely. Policy has to prioritize the restoration of mangrove forests and the planting of casuarina trees in coastal greenbelts.
They can't stop a 30-meter wave.
No, they can't. But these natural buffers can significantly dissipate the wave's energy. They trap debris, they stabilize the soil, and they reduce the velocity of the water, which minimizes the inundation distance. It's a massive, cost-effective, non-structural measure.
Finally, let's talk about specific design solutions for structures that are absolutely necessary in some of these coastal zones. The source provides some concepts that are crucial for ensuring resilience.
We noted earlier that the majority of damaging waves, not the Hokkaido-sized behemoths, are often less than 3 meters in height.
Right.
Therefore, a highly effective and cost-effective engineering mandate is simple: elevation. Just elevating coastal homes where it's feasible can reduce damage to property from the vast majority of tsunamis.
And what construction techniques best allow structures to withstand that sheer kinetic force and the devastating withdrawal of tsunami?
We have to move away from traditional slab construction. The policy should mandate the use of stilts-buttles construction.
How does that help?
Well, it elevates the main structure above the expected flood height. And, critically, it minimizes the surface area of the foundation that's exposed to the scouring action of the water flowing underneath. The water flows relatively unimpeded, which reduces the likelihood of a catastrophic foundation failure.
And coupled with the physics, we have to consider the environment itself, the salt water.
Yes. Given the intense saltwater exposure, policy must also mandate the use of corrosion-resistant materials for all structural supports and foundational elements. That ensures longevity and resilience against repeated saltwater intrusion.
And finally, integrating safety into the community planning itself.
Absolutely. Community facilities have to be part of the mitigation strategy. We need to build community halls at higher locations, intentionally designated and structurally reinforced to serve as immediate shelters and evacuation points.
And we can't forget the dual threat.
No. Preparation requires integrating general flood mitigation measures into coastal planning, acknowledging that a tsunami, at its heart, causes catastrophic and violent flooding.
That brings us full circle. From the precise science of wave generation, the real-time tracking via technology like DART at 6,000-meter depth, the historical scale of destruction, and the ultimate conclusion that smart, non-structural planning is the necessary countermeasure to the proved limitations of even the best tsunami walls. #outro up.
So in this exhaustive deep dive, we have meticulously reviewed the definitive mechanics of tsunamis. We've covered key non-negotiable data points: that top speed of 800 kilometers, the engineering challenges of a 6,000-meter DART deployment, and the catastrophic historical heights, like the 40-meter Krakatoa waves and the defining 30-meter Hokkaido run-up.
What stands out most vividly to me is the necessity of marrying that technological warning with realistic policy. We learned that while the PTWC issues the Tsunami Watch, no current structural measure is guaranteed against the largest tsunamis.
Which forces us to shift focus from the 4.5-meter walls of Japan to the policy of avoidance.
We've established that the future of safety lies in avoiding high occupancy development in high-risk zones and leveraging simple engineering like elevation for those more common waves under 3 meters.
And considering that land use planning involves deciding what structures are permissible and knowing the vulnerability of India's entire coastline, this raises a final, provocative thought for you, the learner.
Beyond basic awareness campaigns and DART installation, what key legal non-structural measure, such as compulsory and enforceable coastal setback zones that mandate that distant structures must be built from the shoreline, or maybe binding regulations that enforce stilt spiles construction for all new commercial high occupancy development, should India prioritize to truly safeguard its populations from the next inevitable seismic event?
We encourage you to consider whether the greatest protection lies not in concrete, but in the law. Think about the legal framework that would be required to enforce a permanent retreat from the hazard zone.
Thank you for engaging in this exhaustive deep dive into tsunami dynamics and disaster management. If this level of technical detail and comprehensive analysis is what you need for your preparation, please consider joining our channel as a YouTube member of the Simplified UPSC by PPP community.
We look forward to guiding your next deep dive.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Telegram and Instagram. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.